QuikSound Server, which I've got installed, and I've got a QuikSound player, which is really an emulator, and then a QuikSound server. So I'm going to open the QuikSound server. You can see it right here. It kind of barely fits into my screen capture area, but currently it is configured. I'll open the configuration settings, which is QuikSound Server settings right here. And currently I've got it configured for 32 channels of audio in with a DL32, and that's matching off of the name that is found in my audio devices. So if I had renamed this something else, I would need to match that name here, because this program, the QuikSound Server, it's going off of a contains match, which gives you flexibility. I've switched in testing between the DL32 and a Scarlett, and I've got some other devices, and you can just choose the name of the device that you want according to the way that it's named in your audio device's system settings. So then I've got mine set up to use the speakers for output. If I need to do any direct testing, the server does have the ability to output directly from the speakers or whatever sound system is connected to the server, even though that's not its primary function. That's really for testability. But I've got it set up to use the speakers and two output channels. Sample rate 48,000 is kind of the standard rate that I've been using in most of my testing. You can experiment with other sample rates, but not very much successful testing has been done with other sample rates. I kind of settled in on 16-bit depth because it's good enough, and you're not wasting a lot of extra data. You're going to lose, like if you try to capture more bit depth and then transmit it over the network, there's just more waste involved, and ultimately it's not completely needed. We're not trying to run an effects processor here. So buffered frames per channel. That should default to 128, but if you find that that you get better results with either a higher or lower number, you can experiment with that. But I would kind of fall back to 128 as a default. Excuse me for my throat. I'm going to skip over the next few settings. The do loop back. All these are testing tools. I'm going to skip over those for a second and talk about frame sets. Frame sets, if you want a bigger grab of data from the sound card, at one time you can increase the frame set, and it kind of works hand in hand with the buffered frames per channel. So those two things kind of have some relationship to one another. We also have a throttle, which is measured in microseconds, which is millionths of a second. If you find that you're wanting to simulate what happens, if you're on a very powerful computer and you actually find that like it's overperforming in some weird way, you could add a throttle in that would allow the CPU to introduce more rest time at strategic locations in the program. By default, that would be left to 1, which is just 1/1,000,000th of a second. And then the next one, use LZ4 compression. This is one that you need to make a judgment call on, because if you can see my current configuration, I've got 28 channels of audio kind of set up to broadcast, and so I'm definitely going to want to have the LZ4 compression turned on. And that's going to be important for not oversaturating the Wi-Fi AP, because when you send more data, just more bytes of data, there's a certain point where your hardware is going to start heating up because of that. And so the LZ4 compression just reduces the amount of data that's transmitted over the network. And the more gaps of silence in your music, the more things that fall down to the 0 level of volume, the more compression you'll get. I've seen compression ratios as much as reducing the size by 80%, even more. Now, if all channels of audio have completely unique audio coming out all at the same time, and there's no repetition happening and no no silence on any of them, then you will not see as much impact on the LZ4 compression. But it still makes a usually a very large impact on if you're running more than say 8 to 12 channels of audio. I would highly recommend turning that on. If you're running fewer channels of audio and you're wanting to reduce the CPU load on both the the server and the receiver, because with compression there's a certain amount of CPU that's used in compressing the data, and then on each player has to decompress that data. So if you want to improve the CPU performance, you can experiment with sending fewer channels of audio and then turn that LZ4 compression off, especially if you have a really strong Wi-Fi, really strong Wi-Fi hardware. Now the last one, self-launch, right now is just going to be set to true. That's basically saying that this controlling application is going to use an embedded version of the communication app that communicates with your sound system and sends that audio over the broadcast of your UDP network broadcast. So, but we could potentially install that as a separate component, but I've successfully embedded it into this Objective-C based Mac OS app, which is a huge win, I think, because it makes it simpler for you to set this up. So if I start the broadcast here, let's see what happens. Oh, it actually immediately played music. I'm a little bit surprised because I had just reinstalled the QuikSound Server a few minutes ago to get ready for this demo. It so happens in the background over here I've got an iPad simulator running, and you can see that it's receiving data. And if you've watched the other training videos, you're familiar with how the QuikSound player works. And I can go over here and pause the audio broadcast, and then right away, the music stops. I'm going to turn the music up a little bit louder so that you can hear it better when it starts. Honestly, I'm not sure what music is playing because I've just kind of got this on a random list. So hopefully, I'm going to turn it down. So hopefully, YouTube won't nail me for some sort of, music copyright infringement. Because I'm not really trying to use their music to do anything other than just show how the audio system works. Okay, so you can also on the server, you can turn on these input meters, and if you change fast to slow, it just changes how quickly that updates. It changes, what period of time it's averaging it on. Smooths it out if it's a little bit slower move on smooth. But I do recommend when you don't need these running, don't just leave them on indiscriminately. Do go ahead and turn those off when you're not actually needing to monitor them. And back, same thing on the player. The player has meters, but if I turn this up, you're going to hear a warble when those meters are turned on, and it gets more clean when they're turned off. So if you have somebody, as an administrator, if you have somebody who is complaining about a warble, have them check their meters first before messing around with other settings, because that's the easiest way to get rid of that. But I have it kind of on the to-do list to isolate that problem and fix it. But right now, that's the workaround there. On the far right side, you can see we've got some logs. Most of the time, you're not going to be interested in that, but you can kind of see if I pause the audio broadcast, it'll freeze that for a second. And the way I've written this or created it, the number at the beginning is just sequential. So every entry that gets put into this log is just sequentially goes up by one. So you can see it's reverse chronological. So the most recent log is the one at the top. And then as you go down, if you scroll down, you're looking at older logs. So, and this one, the oldest one showing is 135, 136. So what this is doing is it's automatically trimming off. So you're only seeing, the latest, like 4,000 bytes of logs. So it's not using a lot of memory. But you can use that to kind of see how things are trending. Like we can see here, the deferred GC is removing 500 items from the pool. You probably don't know what that means unless you're a computer programmer. But this has a custom garbage collection system that's part of the program, and this is basically just confirming that that garbage collector is working as expected. And then we see below that average zeros is 1908 out of 7168 ratio of 0.266. And then it was frame sets 1, best ratio 0.26. Some of this stuff was by experimentation. There's a tool to find out what the best frame set ratio was, or the best frame set setting was to use. And through some refinement of the code, it ended up being just 1 is typically the best thing. But if you do change the frame set rate, this would kind of show you, kind of give you some indications. But with this average zeros, what that means, you can see I've got 32 channels of audio, 28 are marked active. Most of the data coming through is going to be zeros, because 0 is silent, right? If you could have either a positive number or a negative number, and those are not zeros, right? But we can see we've got basically 2 channels that are receiving audio right now. And so you can kind of do the math and say, okay, average and whatever period of time this is measuring on. You can see back here it was 1908.31 out of 7168. So it's kind of just continually checking to see, is audio actually coming in? This is a good indicator that you're getting audio from your system. So if you had this, if it was saying average zeros is, 7,168 out of 7,168, that means you're getting complete silence. You're not getting any audio at all. That's what that means. So this is a little bit, kind of interesting, but we probably will have other types of data added to this in the future. But right now, we're kind of minimizing how much logging information we're outputting, just so that we don't impact performance in some way and not overwhelm people with things that are not useful to them. So I'm going to restart the server. Let's see, turn the volume back up over here on the player. And some of the other player training videos, I showed examples of what happens if you make server changes while players are receiving. And sometimes you can get unexpected results out of that. Like, I can probably induce a crash if I go in here and I change like the number of channels and save it and stop the player and then immediately start the player. Okay, so this time it didn't crash, but I've got noise happening now, right? Because I just dropped down to 16 channels of input, but my player doesn't know that. It's sitting over here thinking, it's expecting 28 channels of audio. I'm getting a lot of snap, crackle, pop. So if you make a major change to the server in the current version of the software, which is, kind of a beta, early release, your user will need to close their player on their device, reopen it, and you'll notice okay, then we start playing. Okay, so here's a little bit of a problem. This player is not picking up the new data for some reason. I might have to do a little investigation, a little troubleshooting. Okay, so let me do this. Let's stop the player. Sometimes this is an issue. Double check the server settings. Reduce it to 16. This input channel number should override whatever is set over here to the right. So it should limit it to the first 16 available channels. Let me just make sure I'm right about that, because it has been a minute since I did that programming. So resave that. Let's open the player again. All right, well, that worked. Now we only show 16 channels activated. The others are all grayed out. And I am just curious to see if I just go over here and put in 32, save it, close this player, reopen the player. Okay. This is interesting. It's kind of in an in-between state here, because we can see some things did change in the UI based on me changing that to 32. Now if I go in here and I check, let me check some of these boxes. and save that. And then close the player. Reopen it. Now you can see, we've got 16 channels, and then we've got 8 more that are still unchecked on the server admin, and we've got another 8 that are enabled. So now we would be transmitting 24 channels of audio, with the last 8 of those being channels 25 through 32 on the audio device. And there's videos that extensively go through all the features of the player, including how to add favorites and how to tune it so that you get the best audio quality and lowest latency, how to connect it to the audio server. Something important for you to know, by default, the players are expecting your server to have a host name of QuickSoundServer.local. I'm going to see if I can show you where to find that on the Mac. Let me see if I can get that to show up. So I went to System Settings, and hopefully I'm not showing you anything too private here. But if you go under Share, and then under Share, click on Sharing. This computer is probably not the most secure in the world at the moment, so but local host name QuickSoundServer.local. That's where you set that. You just edit that right there. And if for some reason you had 2 of these on your network and you wanted to have a backup, you could name one of them like QuickSoundServer2.local or whatever you want to do. But in that case, we don't really have a failover set up yet. That is kind of on the to-do list eventually. But your individual players would need to go in and change that setting and say QuickSoundServer2.local. And one of the other training videos for the player, I go into extensive detail about what happens if there's no server on the network. They get a specific message telling them that. If it finds a server but it's not turned on, they get a different message for that, which I can show you that right now, because right now the player is paused. And so if I close this, apologies, I close this and I kill the player. So we know we've got the actual computer is set up with the right host name. But what happens on the player, if it doesn't find the QuickSound server running, it's going to take longer to open, and then it's going to have this message. The configuration data was not retrieved from the server, even though the server was found on your network. It is possible the server is currently not running and your admin needs to start it. Now using cached settings, which could have unexpected results. So, that happened because they opened their player when the server wasn't running. But if the server didn't have any settings changed, like if you haven't made any changes on the setting, they could go ahead and start the player, and then you could launch the server, which is QuickSound Server. And if all the settings match up and you hit start, now I didn't have the audio turned up over here, so that was kind of a lame. Could have been more impressive of a demo. But I think you get the idea. So in this case, let's do that one more time. So it's got this message because when the player loaded up, the server wasn't running. But we've got pretty good results because the settings were, hadn't significantly changed. That said, if your server did have major changes, anything significant, like different channel activations, those kinds of things, even things like the labels that you put on, like you can see all the labels are missing on all the channels. So this player it's relying on whatever the last locally saved settings were, and it's not caching like the names of the channels. That's not something that we're doing. We're getting those dynamically. So you'll see if I close the player and reopen it, first of all, it's going to load faster because it's going to find the server sooner. And now we've got all the labels and icons that are related to the label showing up, and we've got a little bit more information. And so the best thing is anytime you're cycling the server or you're making massive changes to the server, it is best to have people restart their players. That's the best thing. It's not absolutely necessary. If you're in the middle of a performance setting, and you want to minimize downtime for them, you could do like, I'll show you the experiment of what happens if let's assume for a second this crashed. If this entire computer crashed, the power goes out on it, something that you can't control. Obviously, the people using the players, they're going to lose the audio at that time, right? So I'll simulate that by crashing it right now. So there, I killed it. So the good news is it did not hurt their ears. There was not a lot of loud sounds or something, and that was very important to me as I was developing the software to make sure that I wasn't going to do something dangerous. That said, I cannot guarantee that there won't be an ugly sound that comes from their system. So, that's always a risk that's there, even though we care very much about people's hearing. So, but let's see what happens if we restart that server again. So QuikSound Server, and then just start. It immediately picked it back up. The players, start immediately receiving data from the network. That's working fairly flawlessly for the most part. I'll turn the music down so you can hear me easier. But that's something that, it is nice if you're able to do that. Like I said, in the future, I would like to have a failover, the ability to have a failover server running so that, like, if one of them crashes, the other one picks up where it left off. Got to do some engineering to pull that off, and I probably would want to get input from clients or possible clients to find out, if that's more important than perhaps some other things that could be provided. So I think that's it for this video. I hope you found something useful. If you want to sign up to be one of our beta clients and kind of get started experimenting with your team, I'd love to have you fill out the form on the website, which you can get there under, if you go to the website and go under beta. This has got some information. There's a lot of information there. If there's anything there that is confusing and you want to talk to me, you can fill out the beta program application, and it's just an inquiry. You're not like committing to anything, but this would give me a way to get back in contact with you. So appreciate your time today. Blessings to you.